Welcome to the Low Carb USA podcast, where we seek to inspire you to help us build this community. I'm Doug Reynolds.
And this is Pam Devine.
We weren't sure what you wanted to talk about, so we're just...
We're ready for
We're
anything.
ready for anything, Doug.
What I was thinking was maybe just a fireside chat, right? Let people get to know you a little better. So we were talking a little bit about doctors that were trying it themselves but not taking it to their patients. And I think that when I look at all the people that have embraced this concept, most of them have come via way of being sick themselves and had an epiphany and then thought, shit, I need to tell my patients about this. But there are a few, and I believe you one of them, where it was their patient that actually taught them something. And I've told this story about you a number of times, I think, but I'm never, as I'm talking, I kind of always think, I hope I'm actually telling the truth here. So
You are.
For those of you, the people that haven't heard your story, maybe quickly just
I'll
tell us that thing about how that lady.
I'll make it brief. So the background was that I started as a GP in 1986, and I'd never seen type 2 diabetes go into drug-free remission ever, not a single time, until 2012. And then one patient really did change my life, and unexpectedly. So what happened was, we keep records on all our patients. We know whether they take their medications or they don't, because we know whether they cash the checks in, as it were, the prescriptions. One lady wasn't cashing any of hers in and hadn't done for months. So I wrote to her, this is completely before I'd ever heard of low carb. I wrote to her and asked her to come in, explaining I'd got concerns about her diabetic care. When she came in, I was in for a surprise. I was in for many surprises. One of them was she was very angry. That was a surprise. The other surprise was that I didn't recognize her because she'd lost so much weight. She looked fabulous. A third surprise was when we did the blood work. This was the miracle. She'd put her diabetes into remission without the metformin. And I just didn't understand what was going on. I was totally mystified. She was annoyed because I had never once mentioned that starch was sugar. So she felt I'd been giving her metformin for a decade without ever talking about sources of sugar. And she even asked whether I was basically qualified, because she felt that was such an excellent point. She felt it was a really fundamental point of medicine that doctors should know that starch digests down into lots of sugar. And so that was her question, Dr. Unwin, do you not know that bread is sugar? Do I have to point this out? And it's a worry to me that you don't know. And really, what a fabulous point. I was scared. And I thought, I need to learn and fast, or I'm going to have a complaint coming my way. And so I found out where she'd been learning from, and there were 40,000 people. That was another surprise. 40,000 people were teaching each other online about the low carb approach. And worryingly, or so sad, they were being rubbished by their doctors and healthcare professionals for what they were doing. And I was humbled really by this, and I thought, this is terrible. They're doing good things and being rubbished for it.
David tried to join this online community. It was diabetes.co.uk, still going strong, the low carb forum. Yeah. And they shut him down because they thought he was a troll. They couldn't believe a doctor was coming to sort of learn about what they were doing. Yeah. So, but it was fantastic because Arjun and Charlotte, that many people in this community will know, who are the directors of diabetes.co.uk, came up to Southport to visit us, and the rest is history. We were then able to we worked with them a lot over the years and help them set up the low carb program, which now over 250,000 people.
No, it's way beyond that, Jen. It's 460,000 people.
Sorry, I'm behind. 460,000 people have done the low carb program that they designed.
Yeah. So it's so amazing. So we went from I was amazed to be investigated as senior partner of a practice. How dare you? You know, they wanted to come and check my qualifications and all the rest of it. I just couldn't. Nobody's ever investigated me. I was so humiliated by the whole thing. And then it turned into almost instant friendship. And the low carb program, which I did the physiology and Jen did the psychology for, and then 460,000 people have done it now. So that one pivotal case, that one N=1 that we talk about, has had an effect on hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah, I mean, the one bit that I hadn't got from having heard your story and recounted it was the fact that she was angry with you. I didn't realize that she actually came in angry, and in a way, I suppose we all should be. You know, it's like her point was, you as a doctor, why didn't you know this? Yeah, because you weren't taught it at you know, when you were at university. You
absolutely, but
doctors don't get taught that is just criminal.
It is, and it's no excuse, and I knew it. I'd been caught with my pants down, and I absolutely knew it. That is no excuse. Doctors should know about physiology. And the only response is to admit that you have something to learn and make up for it.
David was at a bit of a turning point anyway, because he was sort of aware that everything he was trying to do for people with obesity and diabetes and, you know, other chronic conditions, they weren't getting any better. It was just adding medications. It was all a bit stressful. Unbeknownst to us, he was actually probably pre-diabetic as well. Looking back, he was kind of getting a bit burnt out with general practice. And we'd already been having conversations about, well, you know, what might you do as a sort of final project? What might be something that would be interesting before you retire? So these kind of two events came together, and it was from that and from meeting Arjun and Charlotte, and I'd already sort of gone low carb as well. I'd read a book called Escape the Diet Trap by Dr. John Briffer, who's actually a British GP as well, and that had made a massive difference to me because I've always had a problem with appetite and kind of sugar addiction, you know, just problems overeating, putting on weight, and then dieting. Anyway, this low carb book really made a difference to me. So all of that sort of came together at the same time, and then we started the group at Norwood. We thought, right, let's have a go, because I worked a lot with groups in my job in the NHS, being a psychologist, helping people with long-term health conditions like pain and depression and such like. So I was quite good at running groups. Doctors don't, on the whole, know how to run groups. So David was like, oh, that sounds a bit scary. You know, we don't usually do that in general practice. So I said, oh, it'd be fine. You know, so we invited all the pre-diabetics we started with actually on the practice register. You know, who wants to come for a group? And there was actually a really good response. And some of those people are still with us now. We ran a group last night on Zoom because we've
some of the original people from 20.
We've had to go on to Zoom, obviously, and there's some people that are still doing fantastically. You know, they've lost stones in weight, come off all the medication, put conditions into remission, and that's been the basis of the papers that David's published. So it was it was a great year really, because it became a real turning point in our lives. And has given us a real focus for, and lots of fun, you know, coming to conferences, which we love to do, and meeting the most amazing people. So we never would, if you'd said to us 9 years ago that all of that would have happened, we'd have just been amazed.
I'd like to highlight how many of the initial threats turned out to be gifts. So right at the beginning, I felt so vulnerable, because even the partners in the practice didn't like what I was doing. They felt I was wasting my time. So the first threat was that they wouldn't finance any of it. So that was a threat, but we turned that into a gain really, because that's why we did the groups, because we could do it cheaply. So Jen worked for free, and the practice nurse volunteered and worked for free. And in fact, we've run those groups for free for 7 or 8 years now. But what a gift it has turned out to be, because
such fun.
it's not
great.
light work. So that was the first, a threat turned into a gift. It forced us to do the groups because it was the only way economically to see enough people to help them. Mm-hmm. But then we learned from the patients. It was a joint learning thing and a great experience that I'd never really had, learning with my patients, learning together. So we all went low carb together and week by week learned. The other thing was, because I felt so threatened, it was really necessary to keep careful data on what happened to the patients, because I thought I could have a complaint at any time. So I need to really monitor what happens to the lipid profiles, to whatever. And that habit of record keeping and data collecting is why I've got one of the best data stores in the world from primary care, because we've done it now for 8 years.
Right.
So how often in life, what you think, the arguments I had with my partners, I received horrible emails from people telling me what I was doing was dangerous to my patients. And these threats became gifts eventually, and have rewarded me, which is so odd and fascinating.
Yeah. So, some people who know you will know this, but once you saw the light and decided to do this, you developed that that famous chart with the sugar, the spoons of sugar,
teaspoons,
right? What was equivalent number of teaspoons for all sorts of different food groups and food stuffs, and you were utilizing that. It was on your website and all sorts of stuff, and then suddenly something really bad happened, and maybe you can tell people about that, and because I'd like them to know the story. I mean, I know that bit of it, but I'd like to know where it's gone from then. What's happening?
Okay, so the basis is the teaspoons of sugar equivalent, which is a way for people with diabetes to work out the glycemic consequences of dietary choices. So, for instance, you could find out that a bowl of rice may well affect your blood sugar to the same extent as. So 150 grams of boiled rice is equivalent to 10 teaspoons of sugar in terms of what it does to your blood glucose. So obviously eating rice is not a great choice. And so we wrote that up with an expert on carbohydrates about 6 years ago now. And we redid the maths for 800 foods in terms of teaspoons of sugar. As part of that work, I won the Innovator of the Year award for the whole of the NHS. So that's an overall award for every person working in the NHS, and I was the winner on the basis of that, and on the basis of the drug budget savings that my practice made. Right. So I went to London, and it was great, and it was getting better and better. And then our guidelines people shortlisted my work for a prize. They're called the NICE guidelines. We were shortlisted for a prize. And then my high point was when these infographics, as they're called, were accredited as use by anybody, any healthcare professional wanting to help their patients with type 2 diabetes. So that was the high point of my career, really, when that happened. And that was helping the low carb thing internationally. At the same time, our most popular paper is the Daily Mail. And I've been writing regularly for the Daily Mail for a couple of years now. I've probably written about 60 pages of stuff for the Daily Mail, and it's a very popular paper. But it has a sister paper called the Mail on Sunday. And the Mail on Sunday do not like my work. And they spent months and months casting around, trying to find out how I could be discredited. And so they hit upon the fact they found a coalition of healthcare specialists who didn't like the teaspoons of sugar infographics, who felt that they were wrong. And in my opinion, they more or less blackmailed NICE, the guidelines people, because we did a Freedom of Information request. And what had happened was the person writing the paper about how I don't know, what shall I say, how my work wasn't worthwhile, the person writing that, there's an email where he says to NICE, to the professor in charge of NICE, if you don't retract your support for Dr. Unwin, we will publish the following. And in the following, they're criticizing NICE. So that, in my opinion, was really blackmail, because they're saying, if you don't take your support away for Dr. Unwin, this is what we will publish. And NICE, to my amazement, lacked the courage to back me up and withdrew support. Actually, and at the time, I thought that was a really, really bad day. I was so distressed because I knew they were investigating me for months. I knew they were digging around. And then when NICE didn't back me up, I was really so disappointed. But they never actually managed to prove that the teaspoon of sugar equivalent wasn't equivalent. And those infograms are as useful as they ever have been. And since then, they've been translated into 14 or 15 different languages.
That's
So
incredible.
it hasn't, is publicity always a bad thing or a good
Let's
thing?
just say that if people want to see the full set,
Oh, yes.
they can go to the charity, which is the Public Health Collaboration, and it's www.phcuk.org. And if they're any use to you at all and you wish to give a little donation, there's a donate button.
But otherwise, copy them. If that's all, it's easier.
Yeah,
You
give them
can.
down to patients,
Yeah,
you can download
there's no
them.
copyright. I've no wish to make money out of them. You can just Google Unwin, sugar, and PHC, and that will instantly get you them.
Yeah, I did the same thing just before we got on here. I actually just looked up David Unwin sugar chart, and it was like,
Yeah, it's gone all over.
it's all over. So they trying to suppress it has not happened. It's not worked. Right?
Suppressing has
Yeah,
just gone
it's not
international.
worked,
You
yeah.
want it in Malaysian, or you want it in Arabic, or you want it in it's in Portuguese. 14
Yeah.
Czech. It's in 14 languages. So again, you might think something is a really bad day, and it doesn't always turn out to be.
Yeah,
So
something else that's turned into a gift almost. Like
I think if you try and look on the bright side and give it time,
right.
yeah. My mother always says, what doesn't actually kill you makes you stronger, and
Makes you
she's not far wrong.
No, that's very
The
true.
calculations are correct. Like, and obviously different people eating, say, a bowl of rice will get a different physiological response because they may not be type 2 diabetics, but it just gives people that information is what is essentially the sugary content of the food that they're eating. And like that first patient, it helps people to understand that just because something isn't sweet doesn't mean it's not going to affect your body in that way, and that
exactly.
physically you've got that same challenge. And
It's just a
also
quick way.
for people with sugar food and sugar addiction problems, a lot of the time it isn't chocolate, that it's things like bread and things like that people find really difficult to give up, and that's why, because it's the ultimately the sugar content of those foods which our brain kind of craves, and eventually our bodies struggle to deal with.
When I first started this, it was like I didn't consider addiction at all for a couple of years, and then I had a speaker, like a West Palm Beach event, drop out like at the last minute, and Georgia Eade, Dr. Georgia Eade was recommended to me as a replacement speaker, because she was in the area and she was able to come through on the Sunday, and she agreed to do a talk. And I thought, what the hell's a psychiatrist going to talk about low carb, right?
Yeah.
And so, but I was stuck. So I honestly only agreed to have her because I was stuck. I was like, okay, it's like a speaker. I just need a speaker. And she was absolutely brilliant.
She's a brilliant speaker.
And it was the first time that this whole so it wasn't only the addiction thing, but how it affected mental health.
The mental health side. And we've seen that a lot in the patients.
We see it on a daily basis in clinical practice, don't we?
People who've been on antidepressants for years, and they are really hard to come off, whatever anyone says. But we've seen people coming off, lifelong psychiatric medications. Not everybody, obviously, but it does happen. And people's, both anxiety and depression and energy seem to improve a lot if people stick to it.
I think it's more than that. I think it's people don't choose to be overweight. It's not a lifestyle choice. They don't choose to be overweight. And then when they are overweight, they feel they've let themselves down. They're embarrassed. It's really bad for their self-esteem. And they watch, they struggle on and off, and they yo-yo diet over the years, but they gradually despair because they're not able to find a way out. And for many of them, the only conclusion they can come to is that I'm weak or something wrong with me. And the number of people that I explain about the idea of addiction for them may explain their overweight, and the light comes on in their eyes because they suddenly realize they're not mad or weak.
Right.
That addiction, just as you would have sympathy for somebody with an alcohol problem or indeed a drug problem, you should have sympathy for somebody who can't control their food intake. It's a similar thing, and it's a very useful model. And I remember one lady who's just burst into tears of gratitude. She said, I'm over 50. This is the first time I've understood myself. Yeah. The model of food addiction fits why I overeat and I can't control.
Right.
And even harder for people because, you can avoid alcohol actually. I mean, it is ubiquitous, isn't it? It's around, but I mean, you don't have to drink alcohol. You can avoid it. Cigarettes, you can avoid them. You don't have to smoke other addictive substances. Food, we have to eat, and the culture that we live in is so sugar saturated now. Every celebration, everywhere you go commercially, it's just everywhere. It's so normalized. And that if you, people listening will know that, when they were eating pizza and burgers and donuts, nobody would question that. But the minute you say you're going low carb, people all think you're, crazy nuts. So there's a lot of pressure on people to eat in the way that society is in the current norm.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't be the norm really. So, and also the other point is that people start with sugar very, very young. So most people who are struggling with it will have really early memories, I do, of being really attracted to those kinds of foods. You were kind of born that way, really. A lot of us who really struggle were born with that sort of sweet and carbohydrate craving. So we were given those things as children. And in families, even more now than when I grew up, I think there's that, have something as a treat,
Well, you did well at school,
treating
so
kids with sugary things, so that our brains are exposed to sugar and carbohydrate very, very young. So all of those things go to make it actually incredibly difficult to give it up. So anyone who achieves it, it's fantastic. And the more we band together, as you say, and have that sense of community of people who are eating this way and make it a norm, at least for those of us that are doing it, and have that support, I think that's incredibly important as well. And I think if people see that healthcare professionals and, as you say, celebrities and other people are coming to this view that actually you don't need sugar, you don't need carbohydrate to live a kind of thriving life, and in fact for some of us that's the only way we're going to thrive is when we've got beyond that. And it is possible. It gives people that hope that it's possible to live that way, and it's not a life of deprivation. Actually, it's a life of freedom and kind of energy.
Right.
So,
sorry, Dave.
I was just going to add, I think if only healthcare professionals could be curious about obesity instead of judgmental. So I used to just tell people, well, cut back, eat less and move more, and it's kind of your problem, instead of really showing any interest in why they were so obese or how I could help them or what support they might require. Because that is what you would do for somebody with an alcohol problem.
Right.
You don't just say, give it, or drugs. You don't just say, give it up and walk away. They need support. And Jen has taught me the idea of being curious and interested in the problems that people have, and searching for the real causes of why people are unwell. If you do that, you're far more likely, at the very least, your patients appreciate the curiosity and interest and support. Sometimes it gets rather better than that. You actually learn stuff
Right.
from your patients. And this is the wonderful antidote to fat shaming.
Yeah.
Instead of shaming, which is just makes how would you feel if you were somebody that weighed 20 stone? And, you know, the fat shaming is terrible. Instead of that, we should show curiosity and offer support. And also, if people don't want to have support, they don't have to have it. But I think that's a more useful approach for a healthcare professional.
Yeah, and I think that was, you know, I became aware of this, the whole addiction part of it, and I've slowly over time included more and more stuff about addiction in our events. I mean, now you've seen our whole, there's like a whole morning session. We've got Joan and you and Rob Sivers kind of all back to back there. It's all focused on
Tro as well. He talks about it a lot, doesn't he? Dr. Tro and Georgia Ede, as you say, there's a lot of people in the space.
And you know, I feel like, and I brought it up once when Steve Finney was talking at an event we had a couple of years ago, 2019, and he was talking about the Verta results, you know, and he was saying that they had a 50% success rate, reversal or whatever. And I actually asked him at the mic at the Q&A session, and I said, why is that so low? Because I would expect it to be better. And it's and what it was that other 50%, a lot of them, it wasn't that they did it absolutely right and it didn't work for them and didn't reverse their diabetes. It was that they didn't manage to successfully embrace their lifestyle. And so and that's where this whole there's so many people that literally
there are.
I had when I first started doing this, I just loved it. I used to eat chocolates and stuff. I thought I would never be able to give it up. But the minute I started doing this and I could start eating fat again and stuff, it was like, I was just couldn't wait. I was looking forward to that other food so greatly that I didn't look back on the chocolates or the carbs or the pasta or any of that. I didn't ever look back on it. And I had no time for anybody who told me how difficult it was. It's so hard. And it's like, no, it's not.
I think there's sort of thirds, you know, it's probably thirds. People who can get it quite easily, and particularly if they've got a reason to get it, like they're diabetic, or that, you know, there's or, you know, maybe their pain resolves, or, you know, there's some real good reason to stick to it and they can do it quite easily. I think there's a middle group who struggle considerable amount, and, you know, they on and off the wagon quite a bit. And I think then there's that other group that just like not everybody is addicted to alcohol. You know, some people can moderate, they can go a month without having it, no problem. I mean, I'm like that. I don't have to have a drink if I don't want one. But then there's this other group who've genuinely got this addictive type problem. I know that the scientific community is really split on this idea about whether sugar is actually addictive or not. I mean, I really think it is, and I think there's plenty of evidence to suggest that. And just the fact of this population of people, as you say, who really struggle. And then I think that's going to be what I'm going to talk about actually at the conference, is what can low carb clinicians do for that group? How do you recognize them early on? Because, you know, a third of people, you'll give them the information, they go away and do it. And we find this clinically. Some people don't need the group, they just go off and do it. Some people need a bit more support and they'll off again, on again, and they need the group. And then there's this other group that really need some extra help. So how do you identify them? And then what's the sort of different advice that you would give to those people that is slightly different from some of the stuff that you'll see online about low carb or keto, what generally practitioners might say? So that's going to be the point of the talk, really, is how do we what are some slightly different things we can do to really help that group? And I know that, I mean, Rob Sire is probably going to have a similar sort of topic, so it'll be interesting to see what he says and whether we kind of agree. And then I've also looked at as much of the literature I can on treatment, and to see whether what the evidence looks like for low carb and sugar addiction. So I won't give it away. People will have to come and listen.
Yeah.
Jen and I have learned a lot, really. We're just as interested in our failures as we are our successes. And we've learned a lot by, can we go an extra mile for those people who are not doing as well? And that's how I think we've refined together how we do a better job for those who struggle. It's a bit like, yeah, if addiction is part of the problem for this person in front of you, moderation is very unlikely to be the answer.
Right.
And
so that's why I feel
all the time.
Sorry, I was talking over you again.
No, go on.
No, I'd finished.
No, I just feel like that's something that's in terms of the education that we're trying to do in that. I think teaching doctors about the fact that this addiction is very real, and not only that, but how to help their patients deal with that. I think if we can successfully do that, then that 50% is going to grow. You know, it's going to reduce, right?
I think it's for me, it's the idea of fairness, because I feel so sorry for those people. So I used to just dismiss people who were very obese and couldn't control themselves,
right,
along the lines of, well, you have to take responsibility for what happens to you. And when I look back, I think that's cruel and unpleasant. And so for me, there's a sense of justice in this, that we should have sympathy and we should try and help, and we shouldn't abandon people, because we've had results. We've had amazing results of people who I couldn't have helped before. Yeah. And now I can. And if most doctors become doctors because they hope to make a difference and they hope to help their patients. Yeah. And Jen and I, our thing is, well, you know, any healthcare professional out there, if you want to help people with obesity, we may have something interesting to say that could make you more effective. Right. And it's so rewarding. You know, the people we saw last night on the Zoom call, you're
literally saving lives. We've had people lose 9 stone in weight. Yeah. And you know, and all the sort of benefits that go along with that. You know, people who've been in wheelchairs, and you know, without that slightly different approach, that they would have.
Let me tell you, I can tell you a quick case. I had a young man under 30 came to me asking for bariatric surgery. He also had sleep apnea because he was so heavy. So he wanted a referral for bariatric surgery, and he knew he probably would need a machine to help him breathe at night. Right. That young man, bless him, so far he's lost, I think, 8 stone in weight. And
what is that in pounds or kilos or whatever?
14, 8 times 14, if people can do the math. So 14 pounds in a stone. We couldn't weigh him when he first came. He was too heavy. It wasn't
possible to
even in a practice.
He was so heavy, I couldn't weigh him. Yeah. And it's been life-changing. And he's now doing a couch to 5K run, and it's made such a difference to his life.
But the thing that made the difference was him. I was taking the time to explain to him about addiction, and that it wasn't his fault. It was an addictive process. So taking the time to explain how that works in the brain, and to say, you know, moderation is never going to work because you've lost control of that relationship. You know, it's about being really strict, and then that will get easier over time. And he just got that and ran with it, didn't he?
Yeah. Hasn't needed much help. Just keeps coming in and saying, I've lost more weight.
Go on, amazing. Dr. Brian Lenskes was one who had seen it helping him, but didn't want to take it to his patients. And he came to our event in 2017, and like literally on the Monday when he went back, it was like, okay, everything's changing here. But he went, he had a friend who worked with him at the church. And this guy was like you talked about, where he literally was so heavy that there was no scale that could, he went. And when Brian convinced him that he needed to start doing this, but he needed like a starting point, and Brian told him to weigh himself, but he couldn't. He went and to a like a warehouse, and he asked them to weigh him on those commercial scales there, the truck scales basically.
Yeah.
And I did a podcast interview with him, or YouTube interview with him way back in the day, and he was telling me how humiliating that was. And yet he was so determined to try and fix this. And Brian had told him he needed to get a starting weight, that he submitted himself to this. And he could literally hear the people in the background laughing and giggling and snickering and stuff. But
I think
you
that's
know,
what I
like
mean
he's
by-
like halved his weight, and like it's just like it's phenomenal what
I think it
what he's
also
doing.
explains people looking into the low carb world think some of us are a little bit extreme, and I think really they should understand that if you've been taking medication for 15 years that maybe gave you side effects, or if you've been ill and live in fear for years and years, if you suddenly feel well, you want the world to know, and this is partly where the energy comes from in the low carb world. And it's the same for the doctors. If I so nearly retired in 2012, 2013. And if suddenly, instead of being disappointed in your job, I now see it as the most wonderful opportunity, and every clinic brings rewards and people thanking me, we find it difficult to shut up about it, because we're perverted, we believe. And I think it does annoy other people a bit that as a group we seem a bit over enthusiastic. But I would always sit in that, if you'd taken drugs for 15 years and felt unwell and felt your life was in decline, and then you're able to live normally, you'd be out on the streets banging the drum, wouldn't you?
Right. It's like it's like Fight Club, right? The first rule of keto is don't talk about keto.
Yes. Yes.
Because people just get so sick of hearing it that, the ones that are not open to the conversation yet just get turned off by it. So you just got to find other ways of getting through to them.
Well, particularly in the eating disorders world, really the idea is that people don't cut out food groups. They do eat. That's the advice, to eat in moderation. For sort of for eating disorders. So a lot of practitioners in that space get upset when we say, maybe a treatment for sugar addiction is to cut out processed foods, sugar and grains. That's actually the solution, because we're using this model of it being an addiction. So that's where the tension can come as well with other professionals. And I just got accused on Twitter yesterday of promoting orthorexia. I mean, I need to look into what that is a bit more, but the idea that if you're telling people to cut out food groups, then they're going to fail, and that's going to perpetuate the eating disorder, is one that's around. So there's still lots of research to be done and lots of debates to be had about the best kinds of treatments, but certainly, we seem to be able to help a lot of people, and our own personal experience and all the people that we talk to at the conferences gives me hope, really.
And you've touched on the thing there, Jen. For us, the list of problems that we seem to be helping with is growing wider and wider. So we started off just with pre-diabetes, and then somebody with diabetes snuck into the group. The first guy that we weren't allowed to treat people with diabetes, but one guy snuck in and we reversed his diabetes. That was the first one. And then we began to reason, people's liver function was improving. That was a real surprise, because we kept all the data. We could see the liver function improving. And asthma, people's asthma getting better, eczema cured after years, psoriasis improving, joint pains improving, mental health, anxiety. And then the thing that I'll be talking about in your conference, of course, is blood pressure.
Right.
Because I'd always thought there was nothing you could do about blood pressure but give the drugs. And yet all the blood pressures were improving. So that's so surprising, is the number of conditions, and it's continuing to grow, where you discover, gosh, that's better as well. People come in and say, look, that rash has gone. Indigestion is another one. Irritable bowel is another one. There's so many other conditions that it's worth discussing.
Yeah, it's it's like almost every day I hear about something else that
Yes.
it's helped
Yes.
somebody with.
Yes.
It's
Yeah. And of course,
actually. Sorry.
I was just going to say that also makes us look more bonkers because it looks like we're snake oil.
Yeah, Amy Berger.
This.
Yeah, Amy Berger did a talk at our San Diego event, and she said something to that effect. She's like, "We sound like kooks, because it's like, oh, I've got this problem. Try keto." but the thing is, it works.
Why wouldn't you try it? I would if I had some weird condition and it was suggested. You'd have a go, and I think people have a go and they do feel better, and then they become these.
Yeah, then they become right.
Yeah.
So it's amazing that this sugar chart thing came up today. I mean, I looked it up, ahead of time of having this chat with you, because tomorrow I'm doing a presentation to a group of medical students in India. I've been asked to. So this guy has heard about it and once wanted me to do this presentation, and I was chatting to him yesterday, and he said, like, can you help me? Can it really reverse diabetes? He's got diabetes, high blood pressure, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. He says, I've got this whole list of things. Do you think you could help me? And I said, look, obviously we'll have to find a doctor, but you're a doctor. You can learn about this stuff. But
yeah,
I believe, yes, we can fix a lot of these things. But I've got a friend of mine who actually came to our first event in 2016 from India, and he's got an incredible personal story as well. But he was telling me, I've asked him to join me and be the other half of it, so he can teach people how to do it within their culture. Because he was saying to me, and that when it comes to the sugar charts, is like the southern half of India, like almost eat entirely just rice.
Yeah.
And so,
so
how do you deal with that? I mean, it's like top of your chart here. Like, how many teaspoons was it? Like 12 or something.
Yeah.
And so now he's going to be helping me to hopefully, from a cultural point of view, explain to them, because he teaches, that's what he does. He's got like a keto coaching, low carb coaching program. He helps people do this. So not only are we going to be able to show them the science and that, but now give them practical help as well.
Yeah. If I can make a suggestion, there's a rather good Indian website called D-Life India.
Yeah.
And they have the amazing vegetarian low carb recipes for people from Asia. And the food is really, really tasty. Because I used to find it quite difficult for me to suggest food and recipes, and the recipes on there are really good.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'll India.
Do that for sure.
Jen's just looked it up now.
Yeah, I started typing it in here myself.
Literally dlife.in, and they've got, it says on here, over 12,000 recipes, success stories, messages.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I'll point them to that for sure.
Because people are always saying, well, what can I eat if I can't have rice then?
Right, exactly. It was like in South Africa, their primary source of nutrition is millipap, which is like grits. It's ground corn, basically. And it was like, okay, so yes, you're telling me to go low carb. What the hell must we eat?
Yeah.
And that's where the Noakes Foundation and the Eat Better South Africa program have developed herbapap, which is made from almond flour and coconut flour, and they've been able to produce it at a competitive price. So
wow,
and
so
that is amazing.
And now they're bringing that into these little pilot test communities and teaching people, like taking charge of what they eat, in a little community where it's controllable. And they've just had the most astounding successes. And but they're providing them with a real solution, right? You can't just say stop eating pap.
Exactly.
Because what else do they eat? That's all they eat. Sometimes dip it in a bit of gravy, but that's it,
An interruption about the astounding successes. So on the paper that we published last year, we we made a most interesting discovery, and that was the worse your diabetic control, the higher the blood sugars, the greater advantage you got from going low carb. So my worst cases often turn out to be my best cases.
Right.
And that's in there. It's in the paper in BMJ Nutrition that we actually did the relationship between how bad is your blood control at the beginning, and the worse it is at the beginning, the more you have to gain. And that's an interesting, so when you move into communities where the diabetic control is terrible and obesity really bad, you will get some amazing results from those people when you give them a chance.
Yeah, and
we shouldn't medicate. I think my point is that you normally think if somebody has really, really bad diabetic control, they need drugs and fast. What I found in clinical practice is actually if you give them a chance, these cases will do very well with diet alone, but they do need obviously more monitoring.
Right.
If you're in a community where there's very little money for drugs, as there would be in India and in areas in South Africa,
Right.
the idea of using diet rather than insulin or whatever has some major benefits.
Yes,
Where
totally.
people all over are mortgaging themselves to pay for insulin. This is for type 2 diabetes.
Right.
How wonderful, we're getting people off insulin for type 2 diabetes regularly now. And if that's a very poor person, that could mean a great deal to you.
Well, and I think that's one of the things about that, and I think Adele brought this up when we were talking about the SMHP as well, is like you don't need, if we're going into these communities, I was telling her about the translations that I had for Indonesian and Malaysia and that for our clinical guidelines. And it was like, she was saying the cool thing about that is that those people, they aren't on medications because they just can't afford them.
Yeah, we don't need
to. There's no danger of because that's one of the dangers when people are on meds and they do this diet, because it changes things so quickly that unless you're monitoring and titrating those drugs, people can get in trouble, right?
Yeah.
But if you're in communities where they don't even have the drugs, then this lifestyle intervention can have astounding effects without those dangers.
Yes, that's an excellent point. Excellent point.
Anyway, guys, it's getting to the sort of, I've gone way over what I normally go for my podcast.
Yeah.
I started these podcasts saying I'm going to go under 20 minutes, just to get you out the door so that people, because I don't have an hour and a half to listen to all these different podcasts and that all the time. But the thing is that I've found that there's so much interesting stuff to talk about. It's hard to stick to 20 minutes. Okay.
Great. Bless you. Bye-bye now.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Cheers. You've been listening to an episode of the Low Carb USA podcast. You can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/lowcarbusa.